Have you ever looked up at the night sky, truly looked, and felt that sense of wonder? That feeling of being incredibly small, yet somehow connected to everything out there? For millennia uncounted, the vast expanse we call the galaxy has been humming with life, with civilizations rising and falling like cosmic tides. Imagine grand empires, stretching across star systems like glittering tapestries. The Galactic Union, the closest thing to a central authority, was a stage dominated by ancient, sophisticated players. You had the elegant Elvar, masters of diplomacy and culture, their shimmering ships gliding through the void like works of art. You had the enigmatic Zith, pragmatic and powerful, their influence felt in every corner of interstellar trade. They were the old guard, the architects of the known galaxy. And then there was us, humanity, relatively new kids on the galactic block, hailing from a little blue world called Earth, tucked away in the Sol system. We'd managed to pull up a chair to the great interstellar table, sure, but let's be honest, it was often seen as the wobbly one near the back. To the grand powers of the galaxy, we were useful, scrappy mercenaries willing to fight the dirty wars. Diligent laborers for the massive construction projects spanning star systems. Occasionally, shrewd traders. We were seen as adaptable, resilient, maybe a bit too loud sometimes, but never truly significant. Never a threat. Never a people whose destiny could possibly shape the course of the galaxy. That was the perception. That was the story written in the official histories, whispered in the Grand Council chambers, and accepted by almost everyone. But stories, well, they have a way of holding secrets, don't they? Sometimes, the quietest voice holds the most profound thought. Sometimes, being underestimated isn't a weakness, it's an opportunity. Because while the galaxy shimmered with established power and predictable politics, humanity was doing something else. We were watching. We were learning. We were building, quietly, patiently. In the corners the great powers rarely bothered to look. For centuries, a different kind of strength was gathering, like a deep, slow-burning fire. A strength forged in hardship, fueled by ambition, and guided by a perspective uniquely our own. The galaxy thought it knew humanity. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Our story, the real story, was just about to begin. So, let's zoom in a little closer on this Galactic Union, this vast, sprawling tapestry woven from countless star systems and ancient civilizations. For longer than human history could even comprehend, it operated under a certain rhythm, a predictable cadence set by the elder races. You had the Elvar. Oh, the Elvar. Imagine beings of almost ethereal grace, moving through halls of polished star metal and sculpted light. They saw themselves as the keepers of culture, the masters of the subtle dance of power and diplomacy. Their ships were less vehicles, more like flowing sculptures navigating the star lanes. Beautiful, powerful, and perhaps just a little too comfortable in their ancient authority, believing they truly understood the measure of all things. And then there were the Zith. If the Elvar were the visible hand, the Zith were often the shadow. Pragmatic, powerful in their own right, masters of complex trade networks and technologies that often bordered on the mysterious. Their motives were less clear, their society less open, but their influence was undeniable. They were the silent partners, the calculating minds often working just beyond the spotlight. Together, along with dozens of other, lesser powers, they maintained the status quo. An order built on millennia of tradition, treaties, and an unspoken understanding of who held the reins. It was stable, yes, but perhaps a little stagnant. Like a great old river, powerful but flowing along a well-worn path. And within this grand, established order, where did we, humanity, fit? As we said, we were the newcomers. The energetic species from Sol, still shaking off the stardust from our first interstellar voyages. We were seen, largely, through the lens of utility. Need a tough job done on a harsh frontier world? Call the humans. Need workers for the next mega-engineering project? Human labor is affordable and efficient. Looking for someone to pilot freighters through less savory sectors? Humans are often willing. Adaptable, resilient, sometimes loud, often seen as driven by short-term gains. That was the convenient narrative. That was our box. But here's the secret the galaxy missed, the truth hidden in plain sight. This perceived insignificance, this role we played, it wasn't entirely accidental. It was, in many ways, allowed, even cultivated. While humanity served as the galaxy's workforce, its soldiers, its traders, we were doing something far more critical behind the curtain. We were observing, listening, learning, absorbing every piece of data, every technological marvel, every political misstep, every cultural nuance the galaxy had to offer. Like students enrolled in the grandest, most dangerous university imaginable, we were meticulously taking notes. While the elder races were preoccupied with maintaining their ancient balance, humanity, back in the quiet corners of our expanding territory, wasn't just trying to catch up. We were quietly, patiently, leapfrogging, preparing, building a foundation for something different, something unexpected, a strength nurtured in the shadows cast by the giants. This quiet period of growth, this era of calculated obscurity, was a long game. But even the longest games eventually reach a turning point. Sometimes, all it takes is a single, brutal spark to ignite the carefully laid kindling, forcing a hidden strength out into the harsh light of day. And that spark, tragically, devastatingly, came not in the halls of power or on the major trade routes, but far from the galactic core, in a place that represented humanity's hopeful, perhaps naive, reach for a future among the stars, a fledgling colony, orbiting the small red sun of Proxima Centauri. An act of unimaginable cruelty, born from arrogance and miscalculation, was about to shatter the fragile peace and compel humanity to finally, irrevocably, show its true hand. Proxima Centauri b, it wasn't just another pin on the galactic map for humanity. It was more than rock and water orbiting a distant star. It was a promise, a testament to our enduring spirit, our relentless drive to reach out, to build homes beneath alien skies. It was one of our first truly successful extrasolar colonies, a place where families put down roots, where scientists studied a new world with boundless curiosity, where children born there knew no other sun but the gentle red glow of Proxima. Life here wasn't glamorous by the standards of the galactic core. No towering chrome spires or fleets of luxury cruisers. It was simpler, quieter. A community built on hope, hard work, and the shared dream of a peaceful future among the stars. They were pioneers, yes, but they weren't soldiers. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, artists, families. They believed, perhaps naively, that their little corner of the galaxy was too remote, too insignificant to attract the kind of trouble that plagued the major powers. But trouble, as it often does, found them anyway. It arrived not as a storm, but as a judgment, delivered by the warships of the Drath Collective. The Drath, an insectoid race known for their rigid hierarchy, their relentless expansionism, and their utter disdain for species they deemed lesser. From their chitinous command decks, they looked down upon the burgeoning human colony not as a community, but as an infestation, an inconvenient encroachment on territory they vaguely considered within their sphere of influence. To the Drath High Command, this wasn't war. It was pest control, a swift, brutal demonstration meant to swat down the upstart humans, to remind them, and perhaps the wider galaxy, of the established pecking order. They expected fear. They expected pleas for mercy. They expected humanity to learn its place. What descended upon Proxima Centauri b wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Orbital bombardments rained down, shattering homes, vaporizing fields, silencing laughter. Planetary defenses, designed more to deter pirates than face a full military fleet, were overwhelmed in minutes. Panic turned to terror, terror turned to dust. No quarter was given. No surrender was accepted. The Drath objective was simple: erasure. Wipe this fledgling human presence from the stars. Leave nothing but scorched earth and a chilling message. And in the cold silence that followed, as the last echoes of destruction faded, the Drath fleet departed, confident in their work, convinced they had put an end to a minor annoyance. They had indeed sent a message, but it wasn't the one they intended. News of the Proxima Centauri atrocity reached Earth not as a plea for help. It was far too late for that, but as a scar, a deep, burning wound inflicted upon the very soul of humanity. The grief was immeasurable, the loss shattering. But beneath the sorrow, something else began to stir. Not fear, not despair, but a cold, hard resolve. a quiet fury that resonated through every city, every station, every ship bearing the mark of Earth. The Drath, in their arrogance, had crossed a line. They had mistaken patience for weakness, obscurity for irrelevance. They thought they were teaching humanity a lesson about its place in the galaxy. Instead, they had just given humanity a reason to finally cast off the cloak of calculated obscurity, a reason to unleash the storm they had been quietly gathering for centuries. The time for observation was over. The time for learning was complete. A response was coming. Not a plea to the Galactic Union, not a diplomatic protest. Something else entirely. Something born from grief, forged in resolve, and powered by a capability the galaxy couldn't even begin to imagine. The silence from Earth wouldn't last long. And when it broke, the entire galaxy would hold its breath. Back within the Sol system, the news from Proxima Centauri didn't just echo. It resonated like a physical blow. Imagine the wave of grief washing over billions, the shared heartbreak for the lives extinguished, the futures stolen. There were vigils, memorials, moments of profound silence across Earth and her colonies. But this wasn't just about mourning. In the corridors of power, in the hidden command centers where humanity's true strength resided, the grief swiftly crystallized into something else. A cold, diamond-hard resolve. The leaders, the strategists, people like Admiral Jonathan Hayes, a man whose calm demeanor belied a mind honed for precisely this kind of moment, they understood. The line hadn't just been crossed, it had been obliterated. The era of quiet observation, of playing the long game from the shadows, was definitively over. There were no lengthy debates, no hand-wringing calls for sanctions through the Galactic Union. That path was for the old powers, the ones trapped in cycles of predictable diplomacy. Humanity's response was decided with chilling speed and unity. The Drath had made a statement with fire and death. Earth would answer in kind, but on a scale that would redefine power in the galaxy forever. The order went out, echoing through secure channels to hidden shipyards and classified staging grounds. Unleash them. And so, from the depths of humanity's guarded space, something stirred. Not the familiar freighters or the patrol cutters known throughout the Union. This was different. This was the hidden harvest of centuries of secret development. Meanwhile, in the Zenari system, near the edge of what the Drath considered their domain, the galaxy held its breath, expecting, well, perhaps a strongly worded protest from Earth? A plea for intervention? Maybe a small, token fleet arriving for a doomed, symbolic gesture? The Drath certainly scoffed, gathering their own fleets, ready to swat away whatever negligible force the humans dared to send. Then it arrived. The Behemoth. The name itself felt heavy, ancient. This was no sleek Elvar yacht. It bore no resemblance to the flowing, almost organic architecture favored by the Zith. This ship was brutal, stark, utilitarian to the point of intimidation. It didn't glide, it imposed itself upon space. It radiated power, not grace. Every line, every plate, screamed of conflict, of durability, of overwhelming force. Its sheer size dwarfed anything commonly seen patrolling Union space. And it wasn't alone. Flanking it, like disciplined hounds beside a giant, were two other vessels, the Revenant and the Titan Fist. Smaller, yes, but each one radiated a predatory energy that made even seasoned Union warships seem almost fragile by comparison. Their designs echoed the Behemoth's brutal philosophy: function over form, lethality over elegance. 3 ships, against the might of the Drath fleets believed to be assembling nearby. To the uninformed observer, it might have looked like suicide. But these ships weren't carrying diplomats. They weren't carrying pleas for peace. They were carrying humanity's grief, its rage, and the terrible, accumulated weight of its hidden power. They had come not to negotiate, but to answer the atrocity at Proxima Centauri. The galaxy, which had dismissed humanity for so long, was about to witness the true cost of that underestimation. The silence from Earth was broken, and the first shots of a conflict that would reshape the galactic landscape were about to be fired. The Drath commanders, peering through their multifaceted eyes or sensor displays, likely felt a surge of contemptuous confidence. 3 ships, against their assembled battle group. Dozens, perhaps nearly 100 warships honed through centuries of conquest. This wasn't a battle, it was target practice. They probably issued orders to form standard attack patterns, ready to encircle and dismantle the impudent human vessels. They expected a brief, satisfying display of their dominance. They were preparing for the kind of fight they understood. Energy beams trading blows, shields absorbing impacts, fighters swarming in intricate dogfights. The familiar dance of interstellar warfare. Then, the Behemoth opened fire. The first shot wasn't a warning. It was annihilation. The lead draft battleship, a vessel that had terrorized lesser races for generations, ceased to exist in a heartbeat. Its shields, the pride of Drath engineering, meant nothing against the sheer, brutal force unleashed by human weaponry. A wave of disbelief, then horror, rippled through the Drath fleet. What was that? Before they could process the impossible, the human ships struck again. This wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter conducted with terrifying efficiency. Humanity demonstrated something the galaxy hadn't believed possible. True, overwhelming technological supremacy. They hadn't just matched the galactic standard, they had shattered it. Plasma cannons burned with an intensity that overloaded shields instantly. Kinetic rounds ignored energy defenses entirely, relying on pure, unstoppable impact. Railguns delivered destruction across vast distances before the enemy even knew they were targeted. The Drath screamed for reinforcements. They threw wave after wave of their remaining ships forward in desperate, uncoordinated attacks. It didn't matter. The Behemoth, Revenant, and Titan Fist moved with cold, calculated precision, weathering the ineffective Drath return fire against armor plating that seemed impossibly resilient. They dismantled the Drath fleet piece by agonizing piece. You see, humanity had spent centuries being underestimated. We watched the galaxy, studied its technologies, analyzed its doctrines, learned its weaknesses. And when the time came, when pushed by unbearable loss, we didn't just aim to catch up. We aimed to surpass, to create weapons and defenses born from a different understanding of physics, a different approach to warfare. The engagement, the one the Drath thought would be a swift execution of the humans, lasted less than an hour. When the weapons fell silent, the once mighty Drath battle group was simply gone, reduced to drifting scrap metal casting eerie shadows against the backdrop of the stars. News of this annihilation, flashed across galactic networks, carried by frantic Union observers who had watched in horrified silence. The message was brutally clear. Humanity wasn't just a minor species anymore. They were something else, something terrifying. The Drath had made a fatal mistake, and the price was written in the wreckage floating silently in the void. The rest of the galaxy, watching from afar, suddenly felt a cold dread creep into their hearts. If humanity could do this to the Drath, one of the galaxy's established predators, what could they do to them? Imagine ripples spreading across a still pond. Now, imagine that pond is the entire known galaxy, and the stone dropped wasn't a pebble, but a meteor. The news of the Drath fleet's utter destruction at Zenari didn't just spread, it exploded across the Galactic Union. On countless worlds, beings stopped what they were doing, staring in disbelief at public news terminals. In bustling trade ports, conversations died down as panicked whispers replaced the usual hum of commerce. The Drath? The Drath Collective, known for their ruthless efficiency, their powerful warships? Vanquished? Not just defeated, but annihilated in less than an hour? By 3 human ships? It sounded like fiction, like some terrifying ghost story told to frighten young hatchlings. But the fragmented sensor logs, the frantic reports from Union listening posts, they were chillingly real. Deep within the heart of the Union, on the station that served as its political center, the High Council convened in stunned silence. These were the most powerful beings in the known universe, accustomed to shaping galactic events, dictating terms, managing conflicts. Now, they sat frozen, the usual calm replaced by a palpable unease. Ambassador Jarrell of the Elvar, a diplomat whose race had guided galactic politics for millennia, was the first to break the heavy silence. Her voice, usually smooth as polished river stone, carried a tremor. "We have miscalculated," she admitted, the understatement hanging heavy in the air. Humanity was not what we believed. The insectoid Kathari delegate chittered nervously. They destroyed an entire battle group. The Drath had nearly 100 warships, and the humans, interrupted Grand Marshal Sorak of the Thales, his feline features tight with tension. Only needed 3. A hush fell again. The implications were staggering. Humanity, the species they'd dismissed, patronized, used, possessed technology far exceeding their own. The weapons displayed weren't just advanced, they were different. They bypassed established defenses, delivered destruction on an unprecedented scale. Kinetic weapons, long abandoned by most major powers in favor of energy, had been perfected by humans into terrifying instruments of annihilation. They didn't just disable, they obliterated. They did not come for negotiations, the Zith representative murmured, its gelatinous form quivering almost imperceptibly. They did not ask for reparations. They did not even issue a formal declaration of war. No, Jarell agreed grimly, her silver eyes reflecting the horrifying images on the screen. They came for vengeance. Just then, a priority transmission alert chimed through the chamber. Every eye snapped towards the source. They braced themselves. A demand for territory? A threat of further action? A declaration of war against the Union itself? Instead, what appeared was starkly simple. No fanfare, no preamble. Just a broadcast, sent galaxy-wide, originating from the Behemoth itself. Earth does not forget. Earth does not forgive. Stay out of our way. That was it. 3 short sentences that landed with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a claim of conquest. It wasn't a demand for tribute. It was a boundary line drawn in the blood of the Drath. A chilling statement of intent, delivered with the cold finality of an executioner. And just like that, the galaxy, which had held its breath, now cowered. The wreckage of the Drath fleet still drifted through the void at Zenari, a grim monument to humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. The Union scrambled for answers, sending frantic messages to allies, urging preparedness. But deep down, a new, terrifying thought began to echo in the halls of power across the stars. They had miscalculated humanity's capabilities. But had they also miscalculated their intentions? What if vengeance wasn't the end goal? What if this terrifying display was just the beginning? The fear wasn't just about the Behemoth anymore. It was about the unknown depths behind it. What else were the humans hiding? While the rest of the galaxy reeled in shock and fear, trying desperately to understand the hurricane that had just ripped through their perceived reality, humanity's high command wasn't celebrating. There were no victory parades, no triumphant declarations back on Earth. On Black Station, hidden deep within Jupiter's swirling storms and lethal radiation belts, the mood was calm, focused, almost eerily serene. Admiral Hayes and his team watched the incoming intelligence reports, the frantic communications between Union worlds, the panicked redeployment of fleets, the surge in espionage attempts against human interests. They had anticipated this reaction. Fear, Hayes knew, was a powerful weapon, but also a volatile one. It wouldn't paralyze the Union forever. Eventually, desperation would breed action. The Union hasn't made a move against us directly, Commander Elise Carter reported, her voice crisp and professional. But intercepted transmissions show the Elvar and Zith running simulations, trying to find a weakness, a way to counter the Behemoth. Hayes allowed himself the barest hint of a smile. And Carter hesitated, then confirmed, none of their models show them winning. A quiet chuckle went through the few officers present, not of amusement, but of grim acknowledgement. Fear doesn't last, Commander, Hayes stated, turning from the map. Eventually, someone will get brave or foolish. They'll convince themselves Zenari was a fluke, that we don't have the numbers for a prolonged war. They'll try to unite, to test us. Then, Hayes continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming colder. We proceed as planned. Initiate Ghost Fleet Protocol. This was the hidden layer of humanity's strategy. While the Behemoth served as the terrifying, visible deterrent, the real war, the smarter war, was already underway, fought not with cannons, but with silence and infiltration. Imagine ships cloaked in technologies far beyond anything the Union possessed, moving like whispers through their systems. They weren't attacking. They weren't disrupting yet. They were spiders spinning an invisible web, listening to every secret transmission, mapping every supply line, identifying every strategic vulnerability, logging the exact locations of key infrastructure and fleet concentrations. They moved through the heart of Union space, unseen, unheard, unfelt. Meanwhile, back in the Union, the fear began to curdle into paranoia. Rumors spread like wildfire. Had human spies infiltrated their governments? Were collaborators hiding among them? Minor system glitches, once dismissed, were now viewed with suspicion. Trust between the allied races began to fray. Then came the next phase of Hayes' psychological campaign. No grand broadcast this time. Just a chilling whisper dropped directly into the ear of the Union's leadership, appearing as if conjured from the void itself. We are already inside your walls. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Chaos erupted. How? When? Where? Was it a bluff? Or was it the horrifying truth? They ripped their own networks apart looking for breaches that weren't there, grounded fleets for system checks, detained personnel based on flimsy suspicions. The message didn't need to be true in a physical sense. Humanity had successfully infiltrated their minds. The Union, once a beacon of galactic order, began to tear itself apart, not from external attack, but from the crippling weight of fear and uncertainty. They were fighting shadows, suspecting everyone, trusting no one. Admiral Hayes watched the data streams reporting the Union's self-inflicted wounds. The Ghost Fleet continued its silent work, gathering the intelligence needed for the final checkmate. The hidden war was proving just as effective, perhaps even more so, than the Behemoth's overt display of force. But Hayes knew the Union, cornered and terrified, might still lash out. They needed one more, decisive demonstration. One final unveiling to crush any remaining hope of resistance. Paralyzed by fear, haunted by the unseen threat they believed lurked within their own systems, the Galactic Union was fracturing. Trust had evaporated. Coordinated action seemed impossible. Yet, paradoxically, this very desperation pushed some factions towards a final gamble. "We cannot live under this shadow," became the rallying cry in hushed, frantic meetings. "We must force their hand, see their true strength, even if it costs us dearly." And so, driven by a mixture of pride, fear, and a desperate need to reclaim some semblance of control, the Union made its move. Not a full-scale invasion. They weren't suicidal, but a significant show of force. A fleet, nearly 200 warships strong, was mobilized. Their destination, the Kepler defense line, the border region where the silent, imposing form of the Behemoth stood sentinel. Their mission wasn't necessarily to fight, but to posture, to test the waters, to see if humanity would blink, or perhaps reveal more of their hand. As the Union fleet dropped out of hyperspace, weapons powered but not armed, they formed a daunting line facing the lone human battleship. There was a tense standoff. The Behemoth simply floated there, a silent challenge. The Union commander, Admiral Veltra of the Elvar, likely felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Was this it? Would the Behemoth attack, or would it call for reinforcements? Then, something else happened. Something that wasn't in any simulation, any intelligence report, any worst-case scenario brainstormed by the frantic Union analysts. Behind the Behemoth, space itself seemed to unexist. A region of perfect blackness coalesced, swallowing the light of distant stars. From this tear in reality emerged a new vessel. If the Behemoth was brutal, this new ship was void. It was colossal, making the already massive Behemoth look almost standard by comparison. Its hull wasn't just dark. It seemed to absorb light, a perfect, non-reflective black that felt fundamentally wrong. It had no visible running lights, no discernible engines, no obvious weapon emplacements. It was a silent, monolithic shape that felt less like a ship and more like a fragment of the empty void between galaxies given terrifying form. This was Project Revenant. A collective gasp seemed to echo through the bridges of the Union fleet. Sensors struggled to get a reading. Some reported impossible data, zero energy output, negative mass readings, conflicting dimensional signatures. Was it even crude? The implications were mind-bendingly terrifying. Then, the void spoke. The voice wasn't loud, but it resonated, cutting through the panic with chilling clarity. Your designation is irrelevant. Your numbers are insufficient. Your presence is an error. There was no anger, no threat, just a statement of fact delivered with the detached finality of a universal law. It wasn't saying leave or we will destroy you. It was saying, your continued existence here is a logical impossibility that will soon be corrected. Admiral Veltra stared, His decades of command experience, his Elvar pride, his very understanding of warfare rendered meaningless. He had come prepared to face the Behemoth, perhaps even prepared for a fight. He was not prepared for this. This wasn't a weapon. It felt like an aspect of cosmic horror given physical form. This was the masterstroke of Admiral Hayes' strategy, not just to outgun the enemy, but to shatter their very will to resist, to confront them with something so far beyond their comprehension that fighting back seemed not just futile, but absurd. The Behemoth had shown them overwhelming force. The Revenant showed them the unknowable. No shots were fired. No further words were exchanged. The Union fleet, once a proud symbol of defiance, simply turned around. Ship by ship, they retreated, slipping back into hyperspace, leaving the two silent human sentinels alone in the void. The will of the Galactic Union, already frayed by fear and paranoia, had finally, irrevocably, broken. They had looked into the abyss humanity was capable of unleashing, and they had blinked. News of the retreat from Kepler, the encounter with the thing they were calling Revenant, didn't just ripple through the Union. It washed over it like a final, crushing wave. There was no spin, no attempt to frame it as a strategic withdrawal. Everyone understood what it meant. The Union had mustered its courage, made its stand, and had been turned back without a single shot fired, confronted by something utterly beyond their power to comprehend, let alone fight. The fragile alliances, already strained by paranoia and fear, now simply dissolved. What was the point of a collective defense pact when faced with an entity that could unveil weapons like the Behemoth, and then something even more terrifying, seemingly at will? Who knew what else humanity held in reserve? It wasn't a formal declaration of surrender. There was no treaty signed, no public announcement of capitulation. It was quieter, more insidious, like a great structure crumbling from within. The Galactic Union, an institution that had stood for over 1,000 years, that had weathered countless wars, rebellions, and crises, effectively ceased to exist as a meaningful power block. The Elvar, their pride deeply wounded but their pragmatism finally winning out, began pulling back their fleets, focusing on securing their core worlds, silently ceding influence they had held for centuries. The Zith, ever opportunistic, likely saw the writing on the wall and pivoted, perhaps looking for ways to appease or even profit from the new galactic reality, halting military operations that might provoke the silent watchers from Earth. Warlords on the fringes, client states, tributary systems, they all saw the shift in power. Allegiances wavered, then broke. Why pledge loyalty to a dying union when a new, infinitely more powerful force now cast its long shadow over the galaxy? Whispers turned into open discussion in back rooms and secure channels. Accommodation, appeasement, perhaps even quiet supplication to Earth might be the only path forward. It was a surrender born not on the battlefield, but in the mind. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy through force of arms alone. They had conquered its will. They had expertly used fear, uncertainty, and precisely timed revelations of overwhelming power to dismantle the Union from the inside out, making armed conflict unnecessary. The psychological blows, the ghost fleet's whisper, the Behemoth's silent vigil, the Revenant's impossible existence, had proven more devastating than any cannon volley. The great Galactic Union, the titan that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant, was now a relic, its authority shattered, its members adrift, each looking out for themselves, all under the watchful, silent gaze of Earth. The old order had passed, not with a bang, but with a defeated sigh echoing through the corridors of power across the stars. And into this power vacuum, this uneasy silence, humanity prepared to make its final, definitive statement. Not a claim of rulership, but a clear declaration of the new reality, the terms of the peace they had unilaterally imposed. With the Galactic Union effectively dissolved, its will broken, a tense quiet settled over the star systems. What now? Would human fleets swarm into former Union territory? Would governors be appointed, tribute demanded? Would Earth finally claim the mantle of galactic emperor that seemed within its grasp? The galaxy waited, bracing for the demands of the conqueror. But the message that arrived wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't a declaration of annexation or a list of demands. It bypassed all protocol, all hierarchy, speaking directly to every sentient being capable of receiving it. It simply appeared. A final, galaxy-wide broadcast that laid bare humanity's doctrine, the terms of the new order. The war was over before it began. You just didn't know it yet. Earth does not seek conquest. We have no desire to rule your worlds or dictate your lives. We will not expand beyond our established borders unless provoked. But know this, the events at Proxima Centauri will never be forgotten. The weapons you have witnessed are but a fraction of our capabilities. If any power, any faction, ever again raises a hand against a human world, against our people, anywhere in this galaxy, there will be nothing left of you. Consider this your only warning. The peace is ours to maintain. Do not test it. That was it. No complex treaty, no negotiations. Just a clear, concise statement of fact and consequence. It was a doctrine of absolute deterrence. Humanity wasn't interested in governing the galaxy. They were interested in ensuring their own security, absolute and inviolable. They drew a line not around territory on a map, but around their people. Touch one, anywhere, and face utter annihilation. The relief in some quarters was palpable. No occupation, no forced assimilation. But underpinning that relief was a chilling realization. The peace was conditional, maintained not by mutual agreement, but by the unquestionable, terrifying power of one species. Humanity had become the silent, watchful guardians of their own proclaimed peace, a peace enforced by the promise of extinction for any who dared break it. The great empires, the minor powers, the independent worlds, they all understood. The rules had fundamentally changed. No treaty was ever signed. No formal surrender document exchanged hands, but the galaxy submitted nonetheless. Defense budgets were quietly slashed or redirected. Aggressive postures were softened. Skirmishes along former borders ceased. Everyone, from the highest chancellor to the lowest freighter pilot, now operated with a new, unspoken awareness. Don't provoke Earth. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy in the traditional sense. They hadn't planted flags or installed viceroys. They ruled through something far more potent, certainty. The absolute certainty in the minds of every other species that challenging humanity was synonymous with self-destruction. And so, a new era dawned across the stars. An era not of enforced unity under a galactic government, but of fractured polities held in a state of enforced peace by a power that desired only to be left alone, but was terrifyingly prepared to ensure that it was. The galaxy was quiet now, but it was the quiet of a forest when a great predator is known to be nearby. And so, the storm passed. The great Galactic Union was a memory, the mighty Drath Empire's shattered remnants. Humanity, once the underestimated underdog, now stood as the undisputed, if reluctant, hegemon of the known galaxy. Back on Black Station, the architects of this swift, brutal ascension allowed themselves a rare moment, not of celebration, but perhaps of quiet satisfaction. The objective, ensuring humanity's security, avenging Proxima Centauri, and establishing an unshakable deterrent, had been achieved. It's done, Admiral, Commander Carter might have said, the relief evident even in her professional tone. The Union fleets are withdrawn. Hostile chatter has dropped to near zero. They understand. Hayes would likely nod slowly, the steel in his eyes softening, just a fraction. For now, Commander. They understand for now. And that's the crux of it, isn't it? This new peace, this Pax Humana, imposed upon the stars, what is its true nature? Humanity hadn't sought empire. They hadn't demanded subservience. They had simply demanded safety, guaranteed by the ultimate threat. They had become the arbiters of galactic stability, whether they intended to or not. Are they guardians? Protectors who, having achieved unparalleled power, now ensure a baseline of peace that prevents atrocities like the one that befell Proxima Centauri from happening again? A stabilizing force in a galaxy prone to conflict? Or are they wardens? Keepers of a vast, interstellar prison where the sentence for disturbance is annihilation? Has their necessary act of self-defense, their righteous fury, inadvertently locked the galaxy into a gilded cage, stifling growth, independence, and the very messy, unpredictable, but vital process of self-determination for other species? Humanity achieved peace, but it's a peace born of fear. They secured their future, but perhaps at the cost of the galaxy's own. The silence that followed their rise is heavy with unspoken questions. Can true peace flourish under the shadow of absolute power? Can trust ever be rebuilt? And what happens to humanity itself, bearing the immense burden and temptation of being the ultimate power? Does the guardian, over time, inevitably become the jailer? The galaxy holds its breath, quieter now, perhaps safer in some ways, but undeniably changed. Humanity watches from the heart of its power, vigilant, ready. Because Admiral Hayes was right. Fear doesn't last forever. Lessons, even those written in fire and wreckage across the stars, can be forgotten. And history teaches us that power, unchecked, rarely stays benign. The story of humanity's rise is written, but the story of their reign, as guardians or as wardens, is only just beginning. The universe continues its silent, endless watch, waiting to see which path they will ultimately choose.